The millionaire's son had only 1 day left to live, until the maid's son did the impossible. Outside, the rain was falling hard. Sheets of water lashed against the tall glass windows of the Harper mansion, as if the sky itself was mourning. Inside the luxurious living room, warm golden light reflected off the pale face of Clara Harper, once the epitome of grace and power in Seattle's elite circle. Beside her stood William Harper, founder of one of America's largest tech empires. He was motionless by the window, his hand clenched tightly around a half-finished glass of whiskey. Across from them, Dr. Daniel Brooks, head of pediatric oncology at Seattle Children's Hospital, delivered the kind of sentence no parent should ever have to hear. In the next 24 hours, his voice steady but breaking at the edges. Baby Champ's condition will become irreversible unless we find a compatible bone marrow donor. The words hit the air like a death knell. Clara trembled, her lips parted, but no sound came out. "No, that can't be. We've done everything." William spun around, his voice cracking with fury. "Doctor, I have money, connections, anything you need. Call the centers in Boston, New York, London, hell, Tokyo if you must. Are you telling me there's truly nothing that can be done?" Dr. Brooks lowered his head, sorrow shadowing his features. "We already have, Mr. Harper. We searched every international registry. There's no match. The odds are almost non-existent." Clara broke down, her sobs echoing painfully through the marble hall. William placed a hand on her shoulder, but his eyes were blank, those of a man who had just watched his entire world collapse. In the corner, Baby Champ lay wrapped in a soft blanket, his skin pale, his breath shallow. Each rise and fall of his tiny chest seemed like a struggle against time itself. Dr. Brooks spoke gently. "We can keep him comfortable, ease the pain, but there's nothing else we can do." William turned away. In his 50 years of life, he had never felt powerless. The man who once conquered the tech world with brilliance and precision could not save his own child. Clara fell to her knees beside Champ's crib, clutching his fragile hand. "My baby, you can't leave me. Please, someone, anyone, save my son." The rain outside grew heavier. Reflections of the chandelier shimmered in the tears streaming down her cheeks. At the edge of the room, Margaret, the elderly housekeeper, watched silently. She had served the Harper family for 2 decades, seen William's rise, held Baby Champ when he cried. Now she pressed a trembling hand to her heart and whispered a prayer. No one spoke again. Only the rain and the steady beeping of the monitor filled the silence, each sound cutting deeper into their despair. William sat down, covering his face. He had once believed everything had a price, success, respect, even happiness. But tonight he learned that life is the one thing money can never buy. As Dr. Brooks quietly left the room, Clara held Champ tighter, trembling as if letting go might make him disappear. "We'll find a way, won't we?" she whispered. William didn't answer. His eyes lifted to the family portrait on the wall, 3 smiling faces beneath a summer sun. A memory now too distant, too beautiful, and unbearably painful. Somewhere within that vast, silent house, fate was waiting for a miracle from where no one would ever expect it to come. The rain kept falling all night. Each drop tapped softly against the glass roof of the staff quarters behind the Harper mansion. Inside, Grace Miller sat alone in her small room, the dim glow of an old desk lamp casting tired shadows across her face. She had heard it all, every trembling word from Dr. Brooks, every broken sob from Mrs. Harper, and the suffocating silence of Mr. Harper upstairs. They echoed in her mind like a sorrowful melody that refused to end. She lowered her head, her hands clasped tightly together. She knew what it meant to lose a child because she had once lost her husband in a work accident when their son was just 3 years old. Since then, Grace had raised her boy alone, working tirelessly until she finally secured this job in the Harper household. The door creaked open. John, her son, peeked in. He was wearing an old pajama shirt, his innocent eyes filled with worry. "Mom, are you crying?" Grace startled, quickly wiping her tears. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm just a little tired." "I heard them talking upstairs. It's little Champ, isn't it? He's really sick, right, Mom?" Grace stayed quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. He's very weak. The doctors are doing their best." John walked over and sat beside her. "Is he going to die, Mom?" Grace's chest tightened. He was too young to truly understand death, yet the fear and compassion in his eyes broke her heart. "Maybe, if no one can help him," she whispered. John fell silent. He loved Champ as if he were his own little brother. Every afternoon, while his mother cleaned, John would stay behind to play with the boy, making silly faces, showing him his cheap wooden toys, singing the lullabies his mother once sang to him. "But Mr. Harper has so much money," John said softly. "Why can't they save Champ?" Grace shook her head. "It's not about money, darling. Champ needs a bone marrow donor, someone whose tissue matches his. But so far, they haven't found one." The boy frowned. "What's bone marrow?" "It's something inside your bones that helps make blood. When someone is sick like Champ, they need healthy marrow from someone else. But it's very hard to find a match." John stared at the floor, deep in thought. Then, after a long silence, he looked up with a strange, steady determination. "Then, maybe I can help him, Mom." Grace froze. "What did you say?" "I want to try that thing the doctor said, to donate my marrow. If it helps Champ live, I'll do it." Grace pulled him into her arms, shaking her head. "No, John, you're too young. That's for adults. It's dangerous." "But Mom," the boy cried, tears glistening in his eyes. "If it were me, Champ would help me. I don't want him to die." Grace couldn't speak. Her little boy, who had never owned a new toy, who had known only hardship, was now willing to endure pain to save the billionaire's son. "John," she whispered, her voice trembling, "do you understand how serious this is?" He nodded. "I do, but I also know that if I don't do anything, he'll be gone, and I don't want that." Grace felt as though her heart were being crushed. Her small, brave son, born into struggle, now carried a courage purer than gold. "John, if you're a match, the procedure will hurt. They'll put you to sleep and take marrow from inside your bone." "I'm not scared," he said firmly, eyes shining. "You always said helping others is what matters most, especially when they need you. Champ needs me." Grace hugged him tightly, her tears falling onto his hair. Fear and pride warred within her, but above all, she felt something sacred, the sense that sometimes God speaks through children in a language of pure kindness that grown-ups have long forgotten. Outside, the rain seemed to soften. Inside that small room, the mother and her son sat together in silence, holding on to each other and onto a fragile hope that felt almost holy. The next morning, the sky over Seattle was still heavy with gray. The rain had stopped, but streaks of water clung to the windows, cold and still. In the small staff room behind the mansion, Grace hadn't slept a minute. She watched her son, John, sleeping peacefully after a night of tears. Yet in her heart, a storm was raging. Logic told her it was madness. A 9-year-old boy couldn't possibly save anyone. But her heart, the heart of a mother who had already lost so much, whispered something else. Sometimes miracles come from where no one expects them. As the first light of dawn filtered in, Grace brushed a strand of hair from John's forehead and whispered, "My son, if God is truly listening, please give me the strength to believe in you." She put on her worn coat and took John's hand. Today, they would step into a room she had never dared enter, the Harpers' grand living room. Inside, William Harper and Clara sat with Dr. Daniel Brooks, their faces drawn and weary. Clara looked fragile after a sleepless night, her eyes swollen, her fingers trembling around a coffee cup. William was motionless, his gaze hollow. When the door opened, all three looked up. William frowned. "Grace, what are you doing here?" Her voice trembled, yet it carried strength. "Mr. and Mrs. Harper, I know I have no right to say this, but please hear me out." Clara exchanged a glance with William, then nodded gently. "Go ahead." Grace took a deep breath and guided her son forward. "My son John wants to be tested for bone marrow compatibility." The room froze. William shot to his feet. "What? That's absurd. He's just a child." John flinched but didn't back away. "I'm not scared, sir. If my marrow matches, I want to give it to Baby Champ." Clara stared at him, this skinny little boy in a worn jacket, eyes shining with determination, and something inside her cracked open. "But John," she whispered, "do you know how dangerous that could be?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am, but Baby Champ's smaller than me. He needs to live. If I can help, I should." Silence fell like a blanket. William stepped closer, his tone softening despite himself. "Son, you're very brave, but this isn't simple. Even adults struggle with this." John's answer was quiet but firm. "I'm not afraid. I just want to save him." Dr. Brooks watched the exchange, visibly moved. After a moment, he turned to William. "May I take a small sample of his blood? The chances are nearly impossible, but if there's even one, we should try." William clenched his jaw, then nodded slowly. "Do it." Grace bowed her head, whispering thanks. She hugged John tightly as Dr. Brooks approached. John sat still while the doctor drew blood from his tiny arm. He winced, but didn't make a sound. Clara's eyes filled with tears. William stood frozen. In all his life, he had never seen something so small, and yet so profoundly heroic. When the vial of blood was sealed and carried away, no one spoke. Only the sound of their own heartbeats filled the air. Grace squeezed her son's hand and whispered, "You're so brave, John." He smiled. "I'm just doing what's right, Mom." And in the dim gray light of that morning, something quiet, yet immense, began to change within the Harper home. When Grace was about to lead her son back to the staff quarters, a deep voice called from behind, "Grace, wait." She turned around, surprised. In 9 years of working there, her employer had never spoken her name like that. "I just wanted to say, I'm truly grateful, even if it's only a faint chance, what your son did today. It's extraordinary." Clara looked up, her eyes red with tears. "John is a wonderful boy. And you, Grace, you're the kind of mother I wish I could be." Grace blushed, lowering her head. Her voice was soft but sincere. "I just hope this can help, Champ. I can't bear to see that child go like this." "Mom," John said quietly but firmly, "can I stay and play with him for a bit?" Clara nodded with a gentle smile. "Of course, John. Sit with Champ. He's missed you so much." The boy walked over and sat beside the hospital bed. Champ opened his eyes slightly, weakly lifting his tiny hand to grasp John's finger, a simple gesture that made the whole room fall silent with emotion. John bent down and whispered, his voice trembling but steady, "Don't be afraid, little one. I'll do everything I can to help you. I promise." Outside the window, dusk descended over the rain-soaked city. The last rays of sunlight shattered against the glass, spilling into the grand mansion, where, amid sorrow, a quiet miracle had begun to bloom, the miracle of kindness. Time moved painfully slow. Each minute felt like an eternity. That morning, the Harper mansion was wrapped in silence and tension. Grace sat in her small room, fingers interlaced, whispering silent prayers. John sat beside her, his feet swinging, eyes fixed on the door. Upstairs, William and Clara couldn't rest. They kept checking the clock, every second slicing deeper into their nerves. Doctor Daniel Brooks had taken John's blood sample to the lab early that morning, promising to call as soon as he had results. Now all they could do was wait. Outside, the clouds began to break. A faint ray of sunlight filtered through the window, painting a golden line across the cold floor. Clara stared at it, murmuring, "If God is real, please have mercy on that child." William stood beside her, fists clenched. He had long stopped believing in miracles, in faith in anything beyond logic and control. But now there was only one thing he wanted to believe in, that his son would live. The phone rang, sharp, sudden. Clara jumped to answer it, her voice trembling. "Hello, this is Clara Harper." Dr. Brooks' voice came through, calm but charged with emotion. "I've checked the results 3 times. I even sent the sample to an independent lab to confirm." Clara froze. William leaned in, holding his breath. "The results are consistent. John Miller is a full match. His marrow is almost perfectly compatible with Champ's." Clara dropped the phone. For a heartbeat, she stood motionless. Then her body broke into sobs. But this time it wasn't despair. It was the sound of life returning. William blinked, speechless. "You're sure? There's no mistake?" Dr. Brooks's tone was steady. "I've never seen a match this rare. The odds are roughly 1 in 10 million. A miracle. There was no other word for it." William sank into a chair, eyes glistening. The man who had built an empire through reason and control now could only whisper 2 words. "Thank you." When Grace heard the news, she wrapped her arms around her son, tears spilling freely. "My sweet boy, you really are my miracle." John grinned. "So, I can help baby Champ now?" Grace nodded, hiding the fear that twisted in her heart. She knew the surgery wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that when fate calls your name, you don't run from it. That afternoon, Dr. Brooks returned to the mansion with the plan. "We'll proceed with the transplant tomorrow morning. John and Champ will be admitted at 6 a.m. I'll need consent forms from both families." Clara stepped forward and took Grace's hands. "Mrs. Miller, I don't know what to say except thank you. Without you and your son, I would have lost everything." Grace shook her head gently. "Don't thank me. John's just doing what he believes is right." Their eyes met, and in that moment, class, wealth, and status simply disappeared. There were only 2 mothers standing there, united by fear, love, and the fragile hope of saving their children. Outside, the sky cleared completely. Sunlight flooded the room, glinting in John's bright eyes, full of faith, full of life. The miracle had truly begun. The night in Seattle was unusually still. The rain had stopped, yet mist clung to the windows, glowing faintly under the soft amber streetlights. Everything inside the Harper mansion seemed to hold its breath, as if the walls themselves knew that tomorrow would decide everything. In the small room behind the main house, Grace Miller sat beside her son's bed. John lay on his side, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, his hand gripping a worn wooden cross, the last gift from his late father. The room was quiet except for the ticking of a clock and the gentle sound of breathing. Grace leaned closer, pulled the blanket up, and whispered, "You don't have to do this, John. You're still just a child." John turned his head, offering a small smile. "I know, Mom, but I'm not scared. I just want Champ to live." Grace's throat tightened. She brushed his hair back, pride and fear colliding in her chest. "Do you know how much I love you? If I could take your place, I would in a heartbeat." John shook his head softly. "No, Mom. Dad used to tell me that when you do the right thing, God stays with you. I think tomorrow he'll be there. And maybe Dad will, too." Tears streamed down Grace's cheeks. She turned away so he wouldn't see and walked to the window. The night air was cool, scented faintly with rain. She folded her hands and prayed, "Dear God, please watch over my boy. Let him wake up tomorrow, and let him see the baby he's saving smile again." Upstairs, Clara Harper was also awake. She sat by baby Champ's crib, watching the fragile rise and fall of his chest under the soft glow of the monitors. The rhythmic beeps were slow, fragile, a lullaby of uncertainty. Clara placed her trembling hand over her son's belly and whispered, "My little one, tomorrow another child will give you his life. I wish I could hold him and tell him he's an angel." Outside the doorway, William stood silently, leaning against the frame. He looked nothing like the unshakable billionaire he once was. There were lines on his face, a heaviness in his eyes, and yet something new there too. Faith. "Clara," he said softly, "tomorrow, everything will be okay." She looked up, a faint smile touching her lips. "I don't know if I can believe that, William, but maybe, for the first time, I truly want to." He took her hand, squeezing it gently. Together they gazed out the window, where the clouds were parting, revealing a pale, tender moon. At that same moment, in the small room behind the house, Grace was still praying. Two mothers, one rich, one poor, unaware that they were looking up at the same sky, whispering the same desperate wish, that their sons might live. No one slept that night, but in the silence, something quietly began to grow. Faith. That morning, the sky over Seattle was painted a pale gray. Dawn had yet to break when the medical vehicle stopped in front of the Harper mansion. Everything unfolded quietly, but urgently, as if everyone feared that even a single breath too loud might shatter the fragile thread of hope. Grace and her son stepped outside. William stood waiting by the door, his graying hair damp with morning mist. When he saw John, he bent down, something he had never done to any of the household staff before. "John," he said softly, his voice tight with emotion, "from today, you are my son, too." John simply smiled politely. "I just want Champ to get better, Mr. William." Grace held John's hand tightly as they climbed into the ambulance. The boy wore a light blue hospital gown, his young face calm, but his eyes shining with quiet determination. Across from them, Clara held Champ in her arms, whispering softly to lull him to sleep, her voice trembling. The ambulance pulled away from the cobblestone driveway, heading toward Seattle Children's Hospital. The siren wailed faintly through the still morning air. No one spoke a word, only their glances met, carrying with them all the fear, faith, and silent prayers their hearts could hold. When they arrived at the hospital, the team of doctors and nurses was already waiting. The two boys were taken into the sterile area. Grace had to stop at the door. She knelt down and kissed her son's forehead. "I'll be right here when you wake up, my sweet boy." John smiled softly. "Don't cry, Mom. If you're strong, I'll be strong too." He was wheeled away. The door closed behind him, leaving Grace standing still, tears falling in silence. In the other room, Clara buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. William placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and whispered, "May God have mercy on our children." Through the observation window, they saw the white coats moving in calm precision. The surgical lights flicked on. The entire room seemed to sink into a world of steady breaths, quiet machines, and hands working tirelessly to save two fragile lives. Inside, John lay still. His breathing was shallow, his pale skin glowing faintly under the lights. "Doctor?" Brooks gave the signal for the team to begin. Needles, scalpels, every motion precise and deliberate. No one spoke, only the soft ticking of the monitor marked the passing of time. After more than 2 hours, the marrow extraction was complete. A nurse carefully carried the small container to the next room, where Champ was waiting. In that second room, Champ lay surrounded by medical equipment. His eyes were closed, his tiny body so delicate it seemed a single breeze could carry him away. As the new marrow began to flow into his veins, the monitor let out a soft, steady beep. Clara gripped William's hand tightly. Grace stood silently beside them. No one dared to breathe too loudly. No one dared to speak. Then the surgical lights dimmed. The door opened. Dr. Brooks stepped out, pulling down his mask, sweat glistening on his forehead. He looked at them all and smiled. The procedure was a success. Both children are stable. In that moment, time seemed to stop. Clara burst into tears in William's arms. Grace collapsed into a chair, her own tears flowing freely. There was no applause, no cheer, only the sacred silence of absolute gratitude. Somewhere beyond the windows, the first rays of morning sunlight broke through, spilling across the hospital hallway, the warmest light they had ever seen. 1 day had passed since the surgery. The atmosphere in the hospital had lightened, but everyone knew the fight wasn't over. John was recovering in his own room, pale but smiling whenever his mother entered. He was weak, yet his eyes still shone, the eyes of someone who had already done something extraordinary. Across the ward, Champ was under observation in the intensive care unit. His vitals were stable, heartbeat steady, breathing calm. Everyone began to believe the miracle had truly worked. That afternoon, Clara brought a small bouquet to John's room. She knelt beside his bed, her voice gentle as the wind. "Hello, my little hero. My Champ's asleep, but he's doing well. I think he'll be smiling again soon." John smiled faintly. "That's all I want, to see him smile." Clara held his hand, eyes glistening. "John, you've changed all of us. You reminded me that the world still has goodness, still has pure hearts." Grace stood quietly nearby, unable to hold back her tears. But that night, the miracle began to falter. Close to midnight, alarms screamed from Champ's room. Red lights flashed. Nurses and doctors rushed in. Champ's body was rejecting the new marrow. His heart rate plummeted, blood pressure crashing. Clara bolted from her chair, sprinting down the hallway. William ran after her. "Please, save my son," she cried, her voice breaking. Dr. Brooks barked orders. "Prepare defibrillator, increase adrenaline, keep his heart going." Under the harsh white light, Champ's tiny body convulsed. The team worked frantically, each second slicing through hope. Grace, hearing the commotion, rushed out with John. "What's happening?" she gasped. A nurse stopped her. "Rejection reaction. We can't let anyone in." John tugged at his mother's sleeve, eyes wide. "Mom, I have to talk to him. He needs me." "No, John, you're too weak." "I have to. He listens to me. I know it." He broke free, stumbling toward the glass wall of the ICU. He pressed his small hands against the cold surface, staring at the fragile body inside, surrounded by tubes and machines. Inside, Champ's heart rate was dropping. The monitor flickered, beeping erratically. John leaned his forehead against the glass and whispered, his voice trembling but clear. "Champ, it's me. I know you're tired, but I gave you my marrow. That means a part of me is inside you. Don't give up, okay?" Tears streamed down his cheeks. "You have to fight, Champ. I believe in you. You're my little warrior, remember?" Dr. Brooks turned, motioning for silence. The room went still, the only sound, John's voice through the glass. He placed his hand on his chest, then on the glass, over Champ's heart. "If your heart's tired, borrow mine. If you're scared, remember, I'm here." And then, it happened. On the monitor, Champ's heart line flickered, then lifted. The beeping steadied. A nurse gasped, "His vitals are rising. He's stabilizing." Clara collapsed into William's arms, sobbing. He held her tight, tears streaming down his own face. Grace stood frozen, staring at her son, unable to speak. John smiled faintly through his tears. "See? You did it, little brother." His knees buckled, and he fell into his mother's arms. "He's going to live, Mom," he whispered, before his eyes drifted shut in peaceful exhaustion. 3 a.m. in the ICU, Champ slept peacefully. Every monitor showed stability. Dr. Brooks stepped out, wiping his eyes. "That boy," he murmured. "He just helped us do something medicine can't explain." Clara looked down the hall, where John lay asleep in his mother's embrace. She whispered, "No words are enough. Tonight, we've witnessed a real miracle." A week passed after that fateful night. Seattle Children's Hospital no longer carried the heavy silence it once did. The hallways were brighter, lighter, and every nurse and doctor now walked with a quiet smile. In the third-floor room, Champ Harper slept peacefully as the morning light streamed through the window. His cheeks had color again. His breathing was calm and steady. Beside his bed, Clara sat still, her hand gently wrapped around his tiny fingers. When the boy stirred and opened his eyes, she gasped and leaned in, pressing her lips to his forehead. "My baby, you're awake." Champ didn't speak, but his lips moved faintly, whispering something almost too soft to hear. "Brother." Clara froze. She followed his gaze to a small photo by the bed, showing John smiling in his hospital gown. "Brother John?" she whispered, tears spilling down. Champ smiled weakly. The room fell silent again, filled only with the steady sound of a beating heart, alive, strong, and miraculous. Next door, John was awake too. He looked frail, but his eyes were bright. Grace sat beside him, smiling through her tears. "You've been sleeping for 3 days, sweetheart." John smirked. "I was just resting a little." He tried to sit up, but Grace stopped him. "Don't rush, honey. Champ's doing better already." "Really, Mom?" She nodded, her eyes glimmering. "Really." He woke up, and the first thing he said was your name. John was quiet for a moment, then smiled softly. "I told him I'd keep my promise." That afternoon, Dr. Daniel Brooks visited both boys. He looked at them with pride behind his mask. "You two have no idea how much this hospital is talking about you. They're calling you the Little Miracle Warriors." John blushed, while Champ waved his small hand at his brother from across the room. Everyone present had tears in their eyes, not from pain, but from gratitude. A few weeks later, the boys were discharged on the same day. At the hospital gate, the sun shone bright after endless days of rain. William Harper, dressed simply, walked up to Grace and John. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "John, you saved my son. There are no words to thank you, but from today forward, I want you to know, you're part of the Harper family." John grinned. "I just want to play with Champ every day." William chuckled, eyes glistening. "Then that's exactly what you'll do." 2 years had passed since that day. Spring had come to Seattle. The sky was clear as glass. Cherry blossoms painted the streets around the Children's Hospital, the very place where 2 lives had once hung by a thread. Along the path leading to Roosevelt Elementary School, 2 boys walked side by side, John Miller, now 11, and Champ Harper, 3½. Champ held tightly onto his big brother's hand, his little backpack bouncing with every step. "John," Champ chirped, "today I'm going to draw a picture for you." John smiled, bending down to ruffle his hair. "All right, but don't use up all the blue, okay? That's my favorite color." Champ giggled, his eyes sparkling. That laughter carried through the crisp morning air, pure, bright, and alive, just like the miracle that had bound them together 2 years ago. That morning, as the school bell rang, John bent down to tie Champ's shoes. The little boy leaned in and whispered, "John, I love you." John smiled, replying with the same words he had once spoken on that night of miracles. "I love you too, my little warrior." Hand in hand, they ran through the school gates, sunlight catching their hair and bright eyes. From a distance, Grace, Clara, and William watched, smiling softly, like witnesses to something sacred. The story closed not with tears, but with light, the quiet light of faith and love reborn. Because sometimes heroes don't wear capes. They're just children, with hearts big enough to save the world.